What is up, everyone? I am Chobo Peon here with ESFI World, and why don't you introduce yourself to the good people?
My name is Mary Ratliff, and I am the director of a film that is currently titled Good Game, which is a documentary about the team Evil Geniuses and about StarCraft.
How did you come to make a documentary about StarCraft, of all things?
Well, I'm a gamer, and I love StarCraft. It was actually one of my favorite games. StarCraft 2 I pre-ordered. Started playing it as soon as I got it. So when MLG came through DC, which is where I live, we went over to MLG DC, and I had been following like the Brood War scene, and I'd been watching GSLs and stuff after that started. And so going to this live event, it was just, there was so much energy, and there was just so much to see, and it was so exciting to me that I realized that there's a story there, and it needs to be sort of shared with the world. And since I'm a filmmaker and that's what I do, my first thought was, well, okay, we're going to make a movie about it.
Let's talk about your history, your professional history. What have you made before?
I've actually I started film school back in 1998, so I've got 2 film degrees now.
Dating herself.
I know. Old. Like, let's go ahead and figure out how old I am. But, so I've got, 2 film degrees, and I've done numerous shorts and things like that, and this will be only my second sort of feature length. Feature length is usually, for most people, 45 minutes or longer. But I did another documentary back in 2002 about cosplayers, people that dress up in anime costumes at conventions. And so that was a ton of fun. And then the past couple of years I've been working on my MFA and getting that. And I've been doing some narrative filmmaking. And so last year I directed 2 shorts. One of them actually shot on 16mm film rather than video. And then started on this one. So I also work on a lot of other things. That's just like my directing credits. Like my actual like industry credits gets really long and boring. So
we'll check you out on IMDb, I'm sure. But so you made the choice to follow EG. Mm-hmm. How'd you come to that as opposed to following MLG? Just the whole scene as a whole.
Well, basically, when I got started, it was, like I said, right after MLG DC, and part of the draw of that for me was Idra was one of my favorite players, and he was going to be there. So, obviously, my attention turned towards Evil Geniuses simply because of that. And when I started to get into the research and I started to look into it, I saw that they were an organization that had a long history. Even though StarCraft 2 is a newer game and people are still figuring out a lot of those things, EG's been around. So they're not sitting there like, making things up as they go. All of their players have long histories, so they are going to have stories to tell. They're all very interesting people. So the more that I looked into it, the more I was interested. And then also, when we first got started, this project, like I know a lot of people are sort of thinking like, oh, everybody's crawling out of the woodwork. I started this a year ago. And when I first got started on this, my pitch was actually to go over to the EG house in Korea they were establishing, which of course didn't happen. Now they're sort of going back towards Korea and stuff. So we've been following that up and down process. Mm-hmm. So at the time, the thing with Korea and the idea of a North American team establishing a house in Korea was very interesting to me. And so that sort of got us in with them. And as I got more into it, I just loved the idea. And I think that they make a good story.
Yeah, I would say that certainly EG has a flair for the dramatics. Intentional or not. Speaking of people coming out of the woodwork, there are a lot of people, relatively, a lot of documentaries being made right now. And the way, or at least one way that they're being made is through help by donations on Kickstarter and things like that. And it's gotten to the point where you see someone say, here's a Kickstarter for XYZ, and you look at it, a little skeptically, which is a good thing, I think. Skepticism is a good thing. How has that process been, coming to the scene, not really known per se as far as, your own work in this scene? How have you felt coming in and opening up a Kickstarter? What have the reactions been?
The reactions actually were a lot more positive than I expected, just because our timing was a little unfortunate, I think, in that we wanted to wait until we had a good product to give people. We wanted to give them a teaser. I did a short teaser after MLG Columbus, but that wasn't something that I thought was going to actually represent what our finished product was going to be. So I wanted to wait until we had something like that. And so when we got about halfway through the filming process, I thought this is the time to sort of put that together. And this is when we're going to go out and sort of tell people this is what we've done so that they would trust us. Because you're right, skepticism, especially with something like Kickstarter, and there's sites like Indiegogo and stuff like that, I think everybody needs to look at that with a little bit of skepticism. So my thought was, what would make me feel comfortable donating? And so I felt like, we wanted to make sure that we were showing people we're not kidding around. We are going to stick with this. So, we've already done this much. And, but we happened to be finishing up that teaser and getting all of our ducks in a row to go public with our Kickstarter right when a backlash started on Reddit. I mean, it was days before. And so I knew that people, I knew the kind of questions they were going to have because of the questions that they were giving to some other projects. And so I feel like, basically what I did was I sat back and I said, they're valid questions. They're absolutely, these people are right to wonder, like, who am I giving a handout to? Why am I doing this? And so I went and I posted my own thread to Reddit. I didn't, wait for somebody else to do it for me so that people could address me directly. And I sat there on that and Team Liquid refreshing it for about 48 hours. I was tied to the computer and to those two sites so that if people were skeptical and they wanted to know about it, I was there. I could answer their questions and they weren't sort of getting secondhand information or trying to find out what was going on. So most of the reactions were pretty positive. We actually met our goal in the first week.
What was the goal?
It was 10,000.
Okay.
So
get me a Kickstarter.
I know. But I mean, the thing with our goal is that that's a fraction of our budget. And that's the other thing is that some of the other projects, not necessarily like StarCraft projects. I follow a lot of Kickstarter projects and a lot of documentary production news and things like that. So a lot of projects, they'll come on there and they'll say, this is our entire budget. We have to raise this. And when we raise this project is going to be great and it's going to be wonderful. Kickstarter's only a piece of our puzzle. Mm-hmm. So obviously we're still sort of pushing that and telling people go check it out. Because every dollar is going to help. So
if it's a piece of your puzzle, where does the rest of the puzzle come from?
Well, the last 6 months have been on my credit card. So that's been interesting. And then after that, we've got grants that we're looking at and things like that. And we're open to sponsorships under the right conditions. So
what would those conditions be? Because I feel like a documentary is obviously sponsorship in esports is a huge revenue stream, but a documentary is a unique beast in that, objectivity and things like that are obviously paramount. So how do you take on a sponsor? Like, let's say SteelSeries wants to sponsor you. Mm-hmm. SteelSeries has a lot of interest in esports. They have their fingers all over the place. SteelSeries might not want to see EG portrayed in a bad light. I believe I have my sponsors correct, but you get what I'm saying. So how do you take on a sponsor like that, and what kind of conditions would you be looking for?
I mean, basically my biggest condition would actually be no blatant product placement, in that we're not going to have somebody be like, oh, hold on, let me put on my SteelSeries Siberia, headset or whatever. Like, we're not going to do something like that. But
Was
the
that
thing
just
is,
product placement just there?
I mean, I guess so.
Are you sponsored? All right.
But, if they want. But, so we're not going to go and, force it into the story. But the fact of the matter is these guys are sponsored. Esports is a sponsored-driven business. So there are wall-to-wall logos. These products are in there. They're going to be there. And, I feel that the sponsors for them, I can't imagine a reason why they would be portrayed negatively. Now, obviously, they might want to say something about how EG's being portrayed or something like that, or esports in general. And basically my condition would be that any sponsor would not have any sort of editorial or content control. So it would be that in the end, nobody, and that's part of the reason that we've sort of been as independent as we have been, is that I don't want anybody to be able to look at me and say, you have to take that out. And have to do that because of a financial burden. So that would kind of be my condition. But I think that, most companies, if they looked at it, the joke I've been making with people is if I made this documentary and suddenly I discovered and proved that StarCraft turned people into puppy kickers and terrible people, that it's still, in the end, it's still PR. So I mean, I think it's still something that people would be interested in. And obviously, the thing is that everybody sort of rails against product placement in film and television, and there's so much more of it than anybody realizes. I mean, it's really an engine that drives the industry. So it's something that I'm looking to the way other people have done it. But obviously my objectivity is, probably my number one priority.
That's interesting. Talk about the actual process of making the film. you've come into the community, you've you've been back at the press rooms at all the events, you've been meeting all the movers and shakers in the industry. How has that been to you for you? Meeting all these entering a new world essentially, and working within it.
It's been pretty interesting because I spent probably 6 months just doing research basically and watching all the videos I could get my hands on about events. I had gone to an event, so that definitely helped. There wasn't any sort of shock walking in the door. Obviously, StarCraft has gotten a lot bigger since GC, but I did a lot of research. So
Case in point, IPL right here.
Yeah, exactly.
You heard 105,000 viewers, and that was a while ago, so it might even go higher. So anyway, sorry.
No, exactly. Things are growing pretty exponentially, but so, basically I did a lot of research because that's, the best way to prepare for the filmmaking process is to know what you're getting into. And it's been good. I think everybody has recognized what I'm trying to do and they've seen the value of it for the most part. So it's been, just walking up to people and talking to them, telling them what I'm doing and seeing who we can get on camera. And we've talked to a lot of people. We just finished up with David Ting a couple hours ago. So that part's been great. So you chose EG because Idra was your favorite player and this and that. And like I said before, EG has a flair for the dramatic, and I sort of mentioned that it might be intentional. And in fact, they, I think, are a team that, first of all, they train their players as far as PR. They sit around and watch interviews and say, here's where you need to be more articulate. Here's where you need to cut to the point. They really focus on image. So, what was it, a stroke of luck that you got this hyper-articulate, PR-savvy team, or was this a conscious choice on your point? It was a little bit of luck that they were the first people I approached and thought of. But we would not have settled on EG and gone that far down that road if it had not been for the fact that they all give good interviews. They all, they analyze themselves in their play in a very good way. They're very approachable to sort of an outside audience. I think that, they were the first team I went to. I contacted Scoots very early on, and he was very receptive to it. But at that point, we hadn't actually decided that it was just going to be EG or that it was definitely going to be them. It was still sort of in the planning stages, and it was seeing them and seeing how good they were that made me say, yes, this is where my story is. So
speaking of story, there are a lot of storylines to walk down with EG. There's Idra the bad boy, as Scoots likes to call him. There's In Control, the choose your title and adjective, whatever. What have you found most interesting about them?
There are a lot of really interesting things, but I'm going to throw something out there that not a lot of people would say, and that's Anna, actually. Because obviously I'm a girl gamer and a female filmmaker, so the whole idea of what women have to face in a male-dominated industry is just interesting to me. And so when I sort of went into it and I was like, I want to talk to all their girlfriends and everything, and maybe their families and stuff, and get that perspective. But I wasn't really thinking of how much I was going to focus on it. But now that she's become more involved in esports, she's doing the hosting stuff here at IPL and all of that, being able to follow that and see that has been really interesting to me just on a personal level. So that's been a lot of fun to cover.
I'm going to take a brief left turn here,
Sure.
But it is related to Anna Prosser and just being a girl gamer in general. I've been a gamer for a long time, been involved in the community, and the reaction to when females enter the fray in a big way is varied. And I'm wondering how much, there are. You look at Reddit during this event. There's plenty of positive comments about everyone, but there's also some flagrantly sexist comments and stuff that just makes you sort of uncomfortable. Although I do think the SC2 community is less guilty of it than say less mature community COD or whatever. What have you run into personally and in following Anna, and I'm sure you talked to Seltzer and everyone, as far as that goes? How do they deal with the fact that there's a bunch of testosterone-driven, meatheads occasionally, and there could be assholes? Does that ever weigh on you?
I haven't actually personally experienced a whole lot of blatant sexism in the gaming community. I'm a WoW player, and that's usually where a lot of people will hit it, is on WoW and talking on Vent. And so the lucky thing with me, I mean, first of all, I was never a hardcore WoW player. I have a lot of other things on my plate, so I couldn't spend that kind of time with it.
Probably for the best.
Yeah. And so I was never like really into raiding and pugs and all that stuff, which is a lot of where you run into it. And I also, my guild just happens to be a lot of people that are sort of at the same place in life as I am, professionals, and a lot of married couples, actually. There's like 5 or 6 married couples in my guild, so...
Gaming brings together a surprising group sometimes.
Yeah. People. And it's, I stayed with my guild leader and his wife in Raleigh, because that's where they're from when I went down to MLG Raleigh. So, I've never had that whole situation where you talk on Vent and suddenly everybody's like heckling you and all of that. I've managed to avoid that.
But you've seen it. Sure.
I've seen it, and it's happened to a lot of my friends. So, I mean, that's definitely something that makes me not necessarily want to put myself out there that way. But I think that, I've seen some of the things that have happened, some of the comments that get levied at Anna and Seltzer and everything. And, I agree with what Anna says a lot of the time, is that people need to realize there's a human being on the other side of that. And so those are the ones that sort of bug me. Like, it's, I don't like body snarking and things like that. And I think that that's just sort of useless, and it's a waste of breath to get into. But at the same time, like, that's not as bad as sort of the like blatant like sexual proposals and stuff that happen in YouTube comments. And that's YouTube. Like, right. I mean, honestly, like, we all know what YouTube is like. Yeah. But I think that those things, like, you would never in a million years say that ever to her face. And so
not Anna, that's for sure, with Jeff.
Yeah, with Jeff right behind her. But yeah, so that's the thing that, I do think it would be nice if people would sort of step back and think, like, this is someone that's standing in front of me that's a human being. And then the other thing is, I just wish people would stop, like, I make the jokes about girls don't play video games, and I find them funny. Like, I've seen Day 9 do it. Like, he had a cast where, like, every 5 minutes he was saying, like, absolutely 0 girls play video games, like, never ever. And so I think those jokes are kind of funny, but every once in a while people will be like, oh, girls just will never be competitive at StarCraft 2. Girls don't have that drive. And I'm like, yeah, we do, actually. There hasn't been one yet. Mm-hmm. So I can't wait for the day, actually.
Yeah, that would be pretty amazing. Hopefully I get to interview her. Last question, because we got to wrap up. How do you monetize something like this? You're talking about you're funding it off your credit card. It sounds like you're sticking your neck out a bit. You do have the Kickstarter. What are you doing as far as distribution goes, as far as a release, and as far as getting your pennies back?
Well, I think that some people, when they think about the film industry, they're always like, you're going to make your fame and fortune, and you don't do that in independent documentary unless you're like suddenly Morgan Spurlock or something like that happens. Like, that's the 1 in a million chance. So that's not really what I'm looking at. Like, I'd love to break even. That would be fantastic to, like, maybe make my money back. But going into this, like, I think that the thing that has to drive you has to be a desire to tell a story. And so that's what's been for me, like, that's what's made it worth it. Now, obviously, we've got ideas for distribution. I've got a film festival plan I'm putting together. There's going to be DVD of some sort, because there's now sort of do-it-yourself DVD distribution avenues and ways to do that. And I've talked to a lot of independent filmmakers over the years at different events about, how they've done it, what they've done. So we have a plan. It's just one of those where there are so many moving parts in it that I don't want to, say like, oh, we're going to do this and this and this. Like, it's always interesting to me when people are like, oh, we're going to put this movie in festivals and it's going to show all around the country. And I'm like, that's a great plan. But you never know. Like, I could send this to festivals. I mean, festival distribution anyway is an interesting game. Like, I've been doing that with my last 2 films. And you send it out, and I have one in particular. This is a short comedy. And every time they're coming back with, like, we really liked your work. We want you to send us stuff in the future. It was really great. We're just not going to show it. Like, we still just don't want it. And that's the industry that I'm in. But like I said, like, we've got ideas, but I'm not sitting here, like, thinking, like, this is going to be this is going to make my
Doesn't
fortune.
you're take it to the mansion.
No, I'm doing this for the love of it, and because I think it's a good story, and I'm a filmmaker, so that's what I do.
All right, there you have it. Thank you so much for sitting down,
Thank
and
you.
Good luck with the film. Let me know when it's finally coming out next year, right?
Next year, but like Blizzard, we don't make promises.
Yeah.
It's done
All
when
right.
it's done.
All right, fair enough. Thank you so much. I'm Shoba Pion. This has been ESFIWorld.com. See you later.